Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Brentford podcast with myself, Daniel, where today we'll be looking back over a second away win on the bounce as the Bees came out of a 2-1 victory away at Selhurst Park at the weekend for our first win there since 1957. Just before we get going, guys, we're a brand new company, so we're looking for your support this season and beyond as we look to bring you the best and most in-depth coverage across the entire network. Whether this is a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform or a recommendation to your friends, we are very grateful for any support that we receive. So let's get stuck straight into it. We wait all season for a Brentford away win in the Premier League and two come along in a row in January. This one, I think, definitely more impressive. I think what we can say about the Southampton game, given the number of points Southampton are on, they're not really a Premier League quality side this season. I think in regards to Palace, the form they came on into this game, the fact they've been in the Premier League for so long, the fact that they were on our shoulders before kickoff in terms of the league table, I think this is a fantastic victory, and it's a game between two teams, who quite often cancel each other out, who are probably very close together in terms of technical quality. So I think it's brilliant that Brentford managed to get this over the line and secure a somewhat statement win on the road, and hopefully this can be the start of things to come in the second half of the season. Let's talk about the team news though, and the key omission before kickoff was that Rico Henry was missing from the squad once again, this time with a hamstring injury, and he's likely to be out for a further month. I think it's concerning in many ways because we know that Rico Henry at the moment is somewhat quite fragile. He is prone to these injuries. He's not really played much in terms of match time yet still. Of course, he only played about an hour against Plymouth, then he played about 5 minutes in the City game. So it's concerning that, he's not putting that load particularly on his body at the moment. Of course, he will be training hard, but he's not playing those match minutes that a lot of the other players are playing, and he's had this setback. I very much hope it's a club urging on the side of caution. I think we can afford to do that with Key Lewis Potter performing so well at left back, and I do hope to see him back fit and firing before the end of the season. I think what we've got to look at, the way we've got to look at this for Rico Henry is getting him fit and completely ready for the start of next season. And I think any minutes he gets this season, if he can get up to the level this season, then fantastic. But I think it is still a little bit of a long road for him, and I really, really do hope we start to see the Rico Henry of old as this season concludes. Instead of Rico Henry on the bench, we saw Christopher Ayer return to the bench, but he didn't get any minutes on this occasion. He's another one who we know often suffers recurring injuries. I think he's another one we should be careful with to an extent. I would like to see him remain fit for a good period of time, hopefully until the end of the season, and then, be involved. Doesn't necessarily have to play every game, but, be involved and contribute towards the team. I thought it was notable that Thomas Frank chose on to bring Ben Mee instead of him when we were seeing out the game in the last few minutes. Perhaps that is a sign of his fitness, but that is mere speculation at the moment. Also, Ben Mee is very, very experienced, and maybe we thought for those 5-10 minutes that he would be the best option for that time. There was still no minutes off the bench for Fabio Carvalho. Perhaps it could have been different if we were losing the game. I don't think the game necessarily called for someone like him. We were in a good position in the game. We had created chances. We had scored the goals. And it was really a case of hanging on to that lead after Palace got their goal back. So you could see why when Damsgaard came off, it was someone like Ben Mee coming on and not Carvalho. Although I do think hopefully his moment is still coming in the next few weeks. I do think he needs to show a bit more in a Brentford shirt. There was one change to the starting lineup in this one since the game against Liverpool that saw Kevin Shada return to the starting lineup in place of Yehoya Moliak. I think we do look better going forward with a more traditional front three. Charder on top of Brian Mbeumo and Johan Wissa. He definitely gives oppositions things to think about with his aerial ability and his pace. And we saw that with the goal, which we're going to talk about, which I think was a brilliant header He's got everything there and he's got all the potential. There's areas of his game he can clean up, but I think he definitely gives opposition fullbacks an awful lot to think about. Should Matthias Jensen have started in place of Vitaly now? I think perhaps so. I think he is the creative engine from a deeper position in midfield. I've spoken about this before. Perhaps in games like this against sides around us, I'd like to see us go with the midfield of Norgard, Jensen and Damsgaard. Perhaps you'll see Jensen and Damsgaard together, given that Norgard came off due to injury in this game and we don't know how serious it is. But yeah, it's a potential option. I mean, we can't say Thomas Frank got it wrong with the result at the end of the day. But I thought maybe we could have been a little bit braver, perhaps, in that area of the pitch. As to Crystal Palace, they lined up largely as expected with the front three of Eze, Sarr and Mateta, who I thought were still bright in this game. And they had Romain Esse, the new signing from Millwall, on the bench, who of course scored with his first touch here. I want to talk about Tyrick Mitchell briefly. I thought he particularly struggled at left back, and that came as quite a surprise to me. I thought, I just thought he really struggled against against our attackers and against our attacking movement. Almost resulted in him scoring in an own goal when he struck the ball against his own post towards the end of the game. And that's just not something I expected from him. I've always considered him as, one of the Premier League's most consistent left backs. I guess it was maybe an off day for him, but yeah, just wanted to point that out. After the break, then we will be going into the action itself and how the match unfolded.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of your Daily Brentford podcast as Brentford won at Selhurst Park for the first time in the Premier League era. I thought at the beginning of the game you could see why these sides are traditionally seen as, in recent years anyway, as established Premier League teams, and why both have an ambition to maybe get to the next level but haven't quite done that yet. Obviously, before kickoff, these two sides were neck and neck. Of course, Palace have had a different kind of season in that they started poorly and they've improved greatly in recent months. But I thought early on you could see how these teams are quite similar in many ways. I think you could see them cancelling each other out. There wasn't too much action to speak about in the first half. I was a little bit worried about getting a full podcast out on this game at half time. I thought Palace did look dangerous sometimes with the long balls towards Mateta. The likes of Eze teeing him up at times as well. But aside from when he stung the palms of Mark Flecken at one point during the first half, there wasn't too much to speak about in terms of them going forwards. I thought Brentford's best chance came from when Wissa's effort from the edge of the area brought a save from Henderson at the bottom corner. I think both of those efforts from Mateta and from Wissa are ones that you would expect the goalkeeper to save. And I thought at half time, it did look like the game perhaps had 0-0 written all over it. All I would say is that the conditions at Selhurst Park, very windy, very rainy. I was getting wet in the away end myself, even though we were meant to be undercover. So that's the kind of day what it was. I thought that made it slightly more difficult to judge the flight of the ball, particularly the long balls towards Mateta. I think Thomas Frank said in his press conference as well after the game that that adapted Brentford style too, and maybe we went a little bit longer, taking those conditions into account. So I think overall, Brentford dealt with that well. The likes of Nathan Collins and Seth Vandenberg have to be more alert than ever because it's not an easy place to play football at the best of times, let alone with these conditions. So I thought we dealt with them very well, and I thought generally it was a very, very solid defensive performance. I thought the second half began in a very similar manner, although Crystal Palace did almost get a slice of luck when Eze's free kick deflected off the post, deflected off Van den Berg, and then hit the post at the other end. Keane Lewis-Potter almost caught Henderson out of a cross or a cross kind of shot at the other end. I do think it probably was a cross, but it looked like it could have been nestling in that top corner, which is something that, I would have absolutely loved to see from Keane Lewis-Potter, because if we have criticised him this year, it has been his end product and his ability to finish those sorts of chances off. And then we come to the penalty incident, and I thought this clearly changed the game. First of all, in terms of the awarding of the penalty, could it have been 2 penalties in one? The penalty was given for the challenge on Nathan Collins, but just prior to that, one of Palace's own players struck the ball against Will Hughes, who did appear to have his hands up. They weren't perhaps in a natural position, what you might say. I do sympathise with him in terms of the ball came from close quarters. It was hit hard. He couldn't really get out the way of the ball, so I could potentially see why that wasn't given. But then moments later, Collins was hauled down, and I think, given the 2 incidences, you could see them both being given either way, I think, and I don't think that is something that would be overturned by VAR. I thought Nathan Collins made the most of the challenge. I certainly don't think there was as much contact as he perhaps made out by his fall, but I think that is what footballers do these days. They know VAR is there. I think, unfortunately, it is almost statistically proven that if you do go down, you are more likely to get the result. Which I don't think is the right thing to do. But for as long as that is the case, for as long as penalties are given more often when players go down, I think that will continue to happen. And I think there was definitely contact. So I don't think, despite what I've seen online from some Palace fans, I don't think they can have too much cause for complaint for the penalty. Of course, then we saw Brian Mbeumo strike the first effort against the post, and I think the crucial thing to note here is that after it hits the post, when it comes back out and rebounds into the box, Mark Gurhey is the one who gets to the ball first, before even Brian Mbeumo himself. And now, of course, you've got to think about the potential scenarios here. Sometimes it could hit the post, and, often in those situations, the taker of the penalty is the favourite almost to get to the rebound in time because of just where their starting position is. So you can imagine a world where a penalty hits a post and then the taker, the ball rebounds back out to the taker and they slot home at the second attempt. I think what happened here in regards to the retake position is it was clear that at the time that Brian Mbeumo struck the penalty, that Mark Gurhey was already sprinting and was already inside the D of the penalty area, which therefore assisted him and helped him get to the ball first when it came off the post. So I've not seen this given before in the Premier League. I can't say I recall this happening since VAR was introduced, but I think technically by the letter of the law it is the right decision. Of course, it is very, very frustrating from a Palace perspective that, of course, Brian missed the first penalty. And, if you give him 2 bites of the cherry, he's not particularly likely to miss the second time, I would suggest. So I think it's very unfortunate. I do wonder how often that does happen in terms of players being in the area. I think Gurhey wasn't the only Palace player in the area at the time it was taken. I think this probably happens quite a lot, but penalties are often scored. And if Brian Mbeumo scored the first effort, or even if it was saved and rebounded wide, perhaps we wouldn't get that decision because Gurhey wouldn't then be interfering with play in any way. I think from that perspective, it's very unfortunate that they. It was very lucky on behalf of Brentford side that we got a second bite of the cherry. Brian Mbeumo gets to keep his penalty record at 100%, which is now 9 out of 9 in the Premier League. I believe the highest is 12 out of 12. I think Yaya Toure has that record, and Cole Palmer now is not too far behind him either. It was notable that Johan Wissa was seen already celebrating the goal behind Brian Mbeumo on his second attempt, despite him missing the first time. That shows the trust and the great relationship they have together. Although, from a logical level and from a management level, I wouldn't be too happy with that personally. I think Wissa needs to be looking to get into the box in case it does rebound out, in case he can get to it first. But, otherwise, I think you've got to give praise to Brian and Bruma. I think it is very difficult to have to retake a penalty that you've just missed. Or even if he had scored, I think it's very difficult to have to retake a penalty because it adds an extra element of surprise. It adds an extra element of mind games, which you don't often take into account. We've been going through Brian and Bumo's head. Does he go the same way? Does he go a different way? Henderson's head likewise. I think all too often in these situations, I do actually think the taker goes the same way. I think we saw that in the Championship game the other week when Isidore for Sunderland had 2 penalties against Burnley, put them both in the same corner. James Trafford for Burnley saved them both. So I thought it was clever and the right thing to do for Brian Abu to switch the sides. And then, of course, Henderson dived the wrong way. But I don't think you can underestimate the mental strength it takes to recover from that and score the second one like he did. And he did it so well. And I don't think there is any doubt in anyone at Brentford's mind that, he was still going to take that second one. And it's nice to see the team really trust him with that despite missing the first time around. When it comes to Brentford's second goal, moments later, I thought this was the one real piece of top quality in the whole game. And this is perhaps the reason I think Brentford deserved to win on this occasion. I thought, firstly, we saw a real piece of quality from Mikkel Damsgaard with the ball in. Again, Damsgaard had a brilliant game, as per usual. We're so used to it from him now. And this time we saw Kevin Shada there in the middle with a brilliant header, which we all know he is capable of. The leap that man has, his ability to get off the ground. And when he makes contact with it like that, when he makes the perfect contact with it, it is unstoppable. And that was one of the best headed goals I have seen us score certainly this season. Certainly in my recent memory, because Kevin Schade got that in him, and he's got the pace in him, and that's why I am keen for Brentford to keep hold of him. I am keen for him to achieve his potential at Brentford. And the fact that Borussia Dortmund are being linked with him, I think says a lot in the first place because of their track record at developing players. And I think, he's got the potential. We just need to get more consistent performances out of him. And it was brilliant that he popped up with a really, really big moment here. And if I have to say anything, it's a shame that he didn't get to celebrate. He was involved in a clash of heads as the ball went in, which ended up in him getting substituted. But as I said, that for me was one of the most, I think definitely the biggest piece of quality throughout the whole game. It was, however, disappointing to concede so quickly after the restart, knowing there would be lots of added time, which put us under pressure. We knew that there was penalty shouts. We knew that Christian Norgard had an injury. We knew Kevin Charder then had an injury. I was expecting 8 or 9 minutes in added time, and that's exactly what we got. So to concede so quickly after the 2-0 goal definitely put us under a lot of pressure. And if you watch a goal, it looks a bit messy. It looks like we switched off. Nathan Collins did not seem to know he was there behind him to tap in at the far post. You've also got Roslev and Yanel. They've kind of stopped. They're not looking to track runners. One of them needs to take Essay, in my opinion. One of them needs to follow him into the box. And Collins also needs to be more aware of his surroundings and he needs to clear the ball away. It's almost like he left it, not expecting anyone to be there. So it's disappointing from that perspective. We gave Essay a goal with his first touch. Don't know if there's some confusion in relation to positioning of players given that it just come on. But yeah, I don't expect to see that normally. And I expect, between Collins, Yanel and Rostov, they've got to be picking him up and they've got to be dealing with that because I thought that was a pretty soft goal to give them. And like I said, it put us under pressure. Having said that, I thought we saw the game out quite well, limiting Crystal Palace largely to set pieces. They had a corner, they had an Eze free kick, which went just over at the end of the game. Quite a few long balls. I thought we dealt with it quite well. Of course, Ben Mee came on to help with that. What impressed me a little bit more was that Brentford in the past have been guilty of getting deeper and deeper in their shape and positioning in these situations when we're holding a lead, and it can result in just the opponents, having an onslaught essentially onto our goal. And I think the more and more pressure you allow, even if you are defending generally well, things are likely to crack at some point if you allow relentless pressure for a certain amount of time. So what impressed me in that last 5-10 minutes was our ability to still get forward on occasion. We're perhaps a little bit unlucky not to score a third. When Mitchell was, as I mentioned in the first part, hit his own post following good work from Johan Wisser. We did get a corner towards the end, and we kind of took it short, but then we ended up putting the ball into the box, which I thought was quite unwise. I thought at that stage in the game, we've got to be keeping the ball in the corner with a minute or two left to see out the remaining minutes. But I thought, largely we dealt with that really well. And, Flecken did not have an absolutely massive save to make towards the end, which is testament to how we saw the game over the line in difficult conditions. I thought overall, like I said, it's one of our best wins this season. Certainly our best win on the road. There's only 2 to choose from. But I hope it leads to more now because, we passed the 30-point barrier. I reckon 35 points is enough this season to ensure safety. So the goal has to be trying to get into that top 8 to try to challenge for the European positions. And now is the time, like I said before the game, now is the time to go on a run. We've got Tottenham at home next week. We know the struggles they're having. I think the difficulty with Tottenham, which we'll explore later in the week, is that their ceiling is still quite high if they're on it. We don't know what manager they'll arrive with next week, if it is still Postecoglou. But, I think there's no reason we can't be confident and feel able to go at them. After that, we face the likes of West Ham away, again, under new management. They're not the most convincing, I would say, at the moment, under Graham Potter, although they did put in a good shift against Aston Villa. But again, I think that's a game that we can be very competitive in. And then we had the likes of Leicester away and Everton at home. And I think clearly Leicester have been struggling this season, as of Everton, although they picked up recently. But I think Everton at home, again, we've got to be confident that we can get something out of those games. And I do really think if Brentford can go on a run during this part of the season, and I think we have to, then that is the only way that we can put ourselves into any kind of fight as we go into the last, 5 or 6 games. So it is very important. This is a time, if we want to turn this season from a good one into an outstanding one, and we really want to create history and we really want to get into those European places, then now is the time to push on. But this is a very, very good start. As I said before the game, I think this is probably our hardest fixture, in my opinion, in the next 5 or 6 games. And the fact we've come out of it with 3 points should give us all the confidence we need. Anyway, that will do for today's podcast. Thank you for listening to the Daily Brentford podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. And once again, we would be extremely grateful for your support, as this will enable us to go bigger and better moving forwards. Daily Brentford can be found on X, Instagram and TikTok under the handle @GSPM Brentford. And I believe now you can find all the podcasts on the Global Sports Podcast Network YouTube channel as well, which I believe is now up and running. We'll be back again on Wednesday this week, where we'll be profiling our latest signing in right back Michael Coyote from Fiorentina. And we'll also be asking what this means for Maz Roslev, whose departure from the club looks to be imminent at the time of recording, to Wolfsburg in Germany. So we'll be looking at his time at the club and everything, and what the 2 deals ultimately mean for Brentford. So until then, from myself, thank you for being with me.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.